What is the ballsiest thing you've ever handed in as a project or assignment in school? In my Greek mythology class we were given an assignment to write a 2,500 word essay on one famous Greek figure in their mythology and how they affected Greek life. In my gender studies class we had to write a 2,500 word essay about an oppressed woman and how she changed the world she lived in. I wrote an essay about Pandora and how her story created the misogynistic worldview of ancient Greece. 2 assignments, 1 essay, for both of them. You had an unimaginative gender studies professor. Our assignment, write an essay on a travesty and how it could have been avoided. My essay's opening paragraph. Many teachers have attempted to squash my thirst for original thought. I thought I was going to make it out of college with my creativity still firmly in place. That was until I met a professor named. This is where I named the professor of this class. The rest of the essay goes on to describe how this professor successfully stripped me of all my original thoughts. My essay's grade, A. It was a college course that combined ethics and English. Me and the professor got into a heated argument in class because I thought John Miller's ideas on objective happiness to be archaic and elitist. The professor told me that my thoughts on the topic did not matter and that he expected my paper on Miller to paint a positive light on his theory. Instead of doing that I turned in a paper in the voice of Benjamin, can't remember his first name, who was Miller's teacher and believed happiness to be subjective. I basically belittled Miller's theory through the eyes of his teacher, just like my professor did to me. The professor gave me a D and ridiculed me in front of the class for doing my own thing. So the paper I wrote about the professor was an attempt to get back at him. I spent weeks making sure the thing was perfect so he had to give me a good grade. Wrote a short story about a cop who was under investigation for police brutality. One night on the job he hesitated and was killed by an armed suspect. I got a good grade, but I had to read it out loud to the class followed by a Q&A. The class was not happy. We had to make a web page on any topic, so I picked flesh-eating viruses complete with gruesome pictures. Teacher's comment, after spitting out my tea and getting my composure, B+. In my consumer economics class, a required course to graduate, I had a rather lazy teacher. He would barely flip through our assignments and pass them back at the end of class and everyone got 100s. Now I know it's cool that we all got 100s, but I went to a high school where many teachers make 6 figures so it bothered me that he put no effort into his job. So he assigned a project where we were supposed to arrange a meeting with the financial planner and discuss our future. That was it, no other specifics. So I decided I wasn't going to do it and instead write a bullcrap paper of the specified length and see if he would notice. The first paragraph was kosher, but the rest of it was about my magical experience at the bank where I walked in and leprechauns handed me sacks of gold and I rode around on a unicorn and said things like I know you're not reading this mister. I think I wrote about 3 pages of that. Turned it in and got a 100. After I graduated I sent him an email with the paper I turned in and he was needless to say pretty pee about it. He even confronted me about it when I returned to the school and tried to lecture me about how I missed out on the opportunity to learn. I looked him straight in the face and said, "Sorry mister, you had a whole year to teach me, but you missed the opportunity." Was it passive aggressive, risky, and childish? Yes, but I became somewhat of a legend for it. I went back maybe 5 years later to see some old coaches and track practice. The coach introduced me to the guys and one of them asked, "Are you the one who wrote that paper about the leprechauns and got 100 on it?" I knew a guy who once took a few hits of acid and wrote a paper for English in grade 11. He handed it in. When confronted the teacher asked him what the frick is this and he responded, "You're the teacher, you figure it out." Apparently it started with words, then unknown symbols and morphed into scribbles and drawings and smudges. In my first year of college I took a horror literature and creative writing course. The final project was a 5-page paper in which the prompt said, "Scare me." I deliberated for days on what the scariest thing was that my professor could receive. On the day the final assignment was due, I handed in a scratchily handwritten paper written on 5 torn out journal pages detailing how I was tired of living and wished to kill my professor. He was horrified and it was until I laughed about it with him that he realized what I had done. It was the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done, but I walked away with an A on the paper and in the class. That professor also went on to become my advisor for the rest of my academic career. Essentially nothing. Senior year of high school, I had a really weird, the kind of weird that indicates some kind of diagnosable disorder, I mean really weird, teacher for history. She would do these things at the end of grading periods called checkups. Everyone in the class was supposed to come up to her, one at a time, to have their composition notebook and binder graded, turn in homework, discuss the piece of work we were most proud of from the grading period, and look at our grades. Welp, my composition notebook was full of doodles. My history binder was actually full of blank notebook paper. I hadn't done the homework, and the piece of work I was most proud of was actually a sheet of notes that may or may not have been literally the only thing from the class I could find. I marched up to her desk, spun a tale about how her inspiring teaching methods made the sheet of notes the thing I was most proud of, and then talked about the new scissors on her desk and the shameful state of public school funding for a bit. Then I went back to my seat. Got an A in that class. In university our project was to create a website. I found the most erotic male underwear I could and called my website Man Pants. I spent 48 hours on that thing making a website for the sole purpose of making my lecturer stare at male crotches for a few hours. I'd say it was literally ballsy. Bullshitted a final paper for an upper level communications class about rhetoric in communication. Didn't make any sense to me, and I wrote it while sick with a fever and the flu. I totally gave up on it hoping to just get a passing grade as I had done well in the class the whole semester. Professor emailed me a week later asking for a digital copy so that he could have it to use as an example for future classes on how to write their final papers. Junior year of HS. English class had a really major final project where we had to write a massive essay comparing a book and its movie version. Something like 20 pages, with 5 sections and citations and everything. I chose The Stand because I love that dang book. However, I never was able to get the miniseries to actually watch it. I bullshitted the whole comparison part. I know I got an A on it, and I think I got a 100. I did a half-page essay in high school. The requirement was a 3-page essay. I put a $20 bill with a paper clip with it. He laughed, gave me back my 20 and gave me a B+. The paper said $20 and a BJ, but he only gave you back the $20. I've literally handed in fan fiction for English homework in the past, but the best story I have isn't mine, it's a friend's. So this friend of mine is doing GCSE art. And the teacher she had was well known for being kind of pretentious. We were on the school bus when she realized that, crap, she'd fricked up her homework. She'd done an abstract piece, but she had to write about its meaning, too, and it didn't have a meaning. It was literally a series of lines going outwards in a circle. Most were colored, she'd thrown in some black too. Well, she thought she was fricked. That teacher was a dong to say the least. Salvation then came from the most unlikely place. The only student in the school more of a dong than that teacher. He'd gotten excluded from primary school for jumping on a guy's head. He was astoundingly xenophobic sometimes. He looked at her work and started rattling off bulls. I'm paraphrasing here. The colored lines represent the variety of life, while the black lines represent the inevitability of death. The girl literally started writing down everything he was saying as if it was a religious revelation. By the time we got off the bus she had a full A4 page of pretentious sounding bulls. She got an A. The teacher thought it was a work of genius. We had to draw a picture of a common saying. The rest of the class had to guess what the saying was. I drew a picture of a guy holding a screwdriver to his chest. He was screwing his heart out. Got detention and had to redo the assignment. Worth it. Now I'm imagining 2 people screwing in a light bulb. I wrote a poem about top ramen cause I could literally not think of anything to write about. I ended up actually getting an A on it because my teacher loved my sense of humor. Need the poem. When I was in high school I had a project that was due regarding mental disorders. My topic was Alzheimer's disease. I totally procrastinated up until the point that it was my turn to present and had absolutely no material. I walked up to the front of the class and drew a stick figure on the blackboard and said, "This fella's name is Jim, and he has Alzheimer's disease. Jim's brain is like a sponge slowly getting holes that let his memories and motor functions fall out. Jim is going to keep getting holes but treatment can help slow that down. Questions? The class, including the teacher, knew I was full of crap. Some kids tried to trip me up and make me reveal that I was completely Hail Marying this thing by asking things like, well, what makes his memories go away faster? What's the cause? That'd be the Alzheimer's. Next question. I got a C+ for my entertaining display, thankfully. I thought you were going to go down the I forget path. Raoul playing as Jim. In high school we had to write a 6-word story. Had to be 6 words or less. I turned in West Philadelphia. Born and raised. 10th grade English. Wrote a story about a group of inmates in a psych ward during group therapy. The doctor was our teacher and the group was me and my mates. The story detailed, from my first person narrative, the inmates gradually getting out of control, ending in the doctor being stabbed in the eye with his own pen and partially eating chewed, only to revert to being a psychotic hallucination of the narrator. Got the highest marks in the class, and a special mention 2 years later when my brother had the same teacher and same assignment. Guess I made an impact on him. A message analysis paper for songs. I picked The Genitorturer's Flesh is the Law. Might be the only university paper ever with footnotes explaining Gnosticism and pegging. Mock newscast doing actual news. The Weekly World News is an actual newspaper, right? Handing in a 10-page response about how the author of a major academic guide for horror lit was an incompetent butt who had failed even basic research, logic, and writing skills on a fairly notable essay, which led to said essay being removed from the course for future semesters, me getting an apology from a tenured professor, and permission to use any film I wanted on the final instead of just the ones watched in class. Nietzsche's Will to Power with Jess Franco's female vampire as one of the examples. The film has a XXX cut. Might be the only university paper ever with footnotes explaining Gnosticism and pegging. You'd be surprised. In one of my classes in high school, we had to come up with a new law. I absolutely despised our teacher, and the feeling was mutual, and decided to make my law as students should be able to evaluate teachers, which will influence their career progression and pay. After my presentation, she asked me what grade I would give her. I just laughed, sat down, and told her it was a loaded question. I don't think I passed that assignment. There was a homework assignment to write a short story. I forgot about it, but I volunteered to read mine out loud to the class and made up an epic tale of like pirates and crap. The teacher walked behind me and saw I was reading from a blank paper. I got a B. I didn't know how to do any of the work on an essay I had to do for my English class since I was absent the day we started, so I just translated the Shrek script into Finnish and Google Translate and copied it by hand. I got an F. But my teacher could barely keep a straight face. Fun fact, in Finnish, donkey's name is ass. A Buddhism class I took in college. One of the main themes of the class was the idea of emptiness or sunnity, such that basically everything in life is empty, and that the duality we have for everything causes the illusion that we think is our ego. Well, we had an essay about this very topic. I gave her a blank piece of paper and repeated the mantra, emptiness is form and form is emptiness, which was one of the main teachings of Buddha. She loved it but still wanted a real essay, which I was wise enough to actively do beforehand. However, she became one of my favorite professors and would go through many hoops to help me whenever I asked for it. In grade 9 French immersion, so equivalent of English class in English speaking schools, we had to choose a book from a box. The French language section in our school library was P4. Go figure, read it, and give an oral report. Nothing to hand in, no quiz. Just a 5-minute vocal summary of a different book from each student. I never even opened my book. I was 4th or 5th on presentation day, so during the first few presentations I read the synopsis on the back, skimmed the first and last chapters to nail down some character names, and winged it. Not only did I ace the presentation, but after everyone had gone the teacher gave me a personal shout out as having made the most exemplary oral report of the whole class. In my high school freshman English class, some friends and I had to do a creative report on Of Mice and Men, and decided to make a movie interpretation of it. This was 2001, so we used a crappy home video camera. It was ridiculously awful, but it turned out to be one of my best high school memories. It was absolutely hilarious, and we got enough of the thematic elements right that we got an A. Junior year, I had a few friends from that freshman class in English again, and we made a similar movie for The Great Gatsby, another A. By this point we had gained a reputation for our hilarious movie making skills. Senior year, some of us were together in English once again. We actually convinced our teacher to let us do a group project, so we could make one more movie adaptation and complete our legacy. There was a problem, though. The book, Night, by Elie Wiesel. We convinced our teacher to let us make what was, essentially, a parody of a true, heart-wrenching Holocaust story. For some reason, she allowed it. We were pricks, and had no idea at the time how offensive we were being. But we justified it because, you know, one of our friends in the group was Jewish, and he didn't mind so. Anyways, we have far too much fun making the movie, overacting, terrible German accents, etc. Then we all cringed for those 15 minutes while it played in class, and quickly realized we were going to fail, get suspended, maybe not graduate. The consequences? We got another A. Turns out our senior year English teacher just DGAF in May, TLDR, made a parody movie of a Holocaust story for an English class assignment. Didn't get in trouble, got an A, still deeply regret it. In a group of 3 we wrote about a fake love triangle that revolved around 3 random people in our class. Everybody read their stories aloud and we were the only ones that were cut off by our teacher. I can't remember what the story was as it was like 10 years ago and we obviously didn't take it very seriously. For my creative writing class senior year, I turned in a poem I'd been working on for a week. She had no idea I just copied lyrics from the liner notes of the CD one had been listening to all period. Yes kids, a CD, on my Discman. It was 2001. You are only a couple of years older than me, so now I am curious what the song was. Not super ballsy but fun. I had an 8-page paper due for a physics class at about 7 pages long with all the classic tricks, 2.2x spaced, thicker margins, 14 points periods, the works. It was due after lunch which I spent in the library typing it up. I decided to add a bunch of nonsensical sentences in random parts of the entire paper to get it to 8 pages. When questioned about it I said someone must have meddled with my paper while I grabbed a quick bite and went to the bathroom. B+. There's a story, probably apocryphal, that on an entrance exam for a top university one of the questions, with loads of room for a long answer, was how would you define confidence, and the person just wrote this. Had a final exam for a class in college, Psychology of Personality. It was a blue book essay exam. We were given 4 topics. 3 would appear as possibilities on exam day, and we had to write 2 essays. So if you prepared any 3 while studying you'd be covered. Well, I only studied for the 2 I thought would be on there. 1 was on there, 1 was not. What did appear was actually the easiest one, though I did not have an outline in my head for it. While it should have been a no-brainer, I got about 5 sentences in, skipped a few lines, and wrote something to the effect of, I am just going to stop here. I didn't think this one would be on here. I don't know how I want to proceed with this essay and whatever I have to write isn't worth reading. I had a 98 average going into the exam, and I think the professor gave me whatever I needed to keep that 98 because my final grade was an A, though I never did see my actual final exam grade. Back in high school, I had to write a short response about the Cuban Missile Crisis for a history exam. I was pretty baked and had forgotten most of what I know about the incident. So I took the biggest leap of faith by bullcrapping my paragraph-long response. Starting off with a Cuban Missile Crisis was a crisis that happened in Cuba. I got an 89 on the exam. Either my response was pretty spot on, or the professor must have taken pity on me lol. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a crisis that happened in Cuba involving missiles, which so happened to be in Cuba during a time we call the Cuban Missile Crisis. A crisis that happened in Cuba involving missiles which became a crisis when the missiles were uncovered in Cuba. I signed up for this free writing class. I thought it'd be easy to pass. I could not have dreamt that I'd have to attempt to pull limericks out of my butt. Not me, but stealing it since the store is pretty ballsy. In my sophomore year of high school, A buddy of mine forgot it was project day for our global studies class. Basically, you had to bring something in, talk about it and get graded. The penalty for forgetting was pretty crappy, like half off your grade, which was almost half of the grade for that marking period. Dude rips off the back of his notebook and takes out a gel pen, opens his book and finds the chapter about ancient Egypt. Finds a photo of some hieroglyphics and does a pretty convincing job of copying them down on the paper in about 20 minutes in homeroom. Tells the teacher it's his name in hieroglyphics. Gets a B+. I'd have given him an A just for incredible resourcefulness and quick thinking. I took a ceramics class while I was at my community college for an elective and I was still undecided on what I wanted to do. And I'm kinda into art. I was a terrible student in that class though, constantly procrastinating and not putting in effort. I feel bad about it now. Anyways, for the final we had to make a sculpture using ideas from all the other sculptures we made throughout the semester. Realized this and just thought I could make whatever I wanted because I was ignorant. So on the last day before class I realized my completed sculpture was totally wrong and had to turn in something. I went into the classroom early and snagged a chunk of clay and brought it to my friend's house in a panic. The final was supposed to take weeks. You have to slowly build it up, allowing the bottom layers to dry and keep adding. I had 2 hours and a big wet brick of clay. I end up making a monstrosity consisting of a star on top of a bar bench, about the size of a normal vase. Since it was all wet clay it wouldn't hold together. So we cut up a metal clothes hanger and ran it through the legs and into the star. This thing was fugly, but it stood up, for most part. I bring it into class, and the teacher takes all the final sculptures to put into the oven to bake them, and we'll get them back next class. I leave feeling accomplished yet ashamed, then it hits me. This thing is probably going to crack or blow because of the metal inside of it. I had the worst anxiety for the next few days, and felt like crap that I might have ruined other people's projects. I walk into class, everyone gets their projects and I have to wait after. She gives me sculpture, still standing, but the clay has shrunk and still has its form, but the metal is poking out of the bottom legs, top star and middle bench. Never have I been so ashamed, lol. I explained myself and the teacher says she knows I tried and thinks I really do care about the class and idea of it, and gave me a C for the final grade. I have no idea how I pulled that one off, but never put myself in that position ever again. TLDR. I less than half-assed my final ceramics project with a hidden, cut-up metal coat hanger and ended up with a C. When I was in kindergarten my teacher gave us an assignment for analogies. The question was, a bird flies, and a fish. The answer is obviously swims, but my smart butt wrote down, doesn't. I didn't get the question marked wrong, but I did get a call home saying there may be something wrong with me and following directions. I disagree. I dropped out of high school and didn't take my GED test until 7 years later, 2013. I'd busted my butt on my own for months to study for it. Plus I had to do approximately 8 hours of state mandated pre-testing to even qualify to take the actual exam. The exam was split into 2 days, and the second day was devoted to the reading English essay. My essay question was something along the lines of, if you could do anything, what would you do for the rest of your life? I spent about half of the 2-hour essay portion trying to make an outline detailing what I wanted to say before I just flat out panicked. I wrote approximately 5 paragraphs about how I had no freaking idea what I wanted to do with my life. I could try to be an astronaut, maybe follow the dream I had as a kid and be a baker, but ultimately I refused to answer the question because there were so many possibilities. I walked out of that test and immediately called my best friend to tell her what I'd just done and bust out laughing because I couldn't believe I'd just made such a risky decision. I passed with flying freaking colors, got a distinguished on my essay, or whatever the best grade was. I'm too tired to dig out my scores. Logically, I knew that I had it in the bag. They aren't looking for content as much as they are proof that you've got a decent enough grasp on the English language. But it was still the single most risky bullshitted thing I have ever done in regards to schoolwork. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.